All right, so as we start this here, I guess it would probably be helpful if you just could put in chat a little bit about what your business is and what you do. That way, if there are any particular questions or examples I can bring forward, that will be helpful. That would be great. So when we talk about compensation, we're talking about the total cash and non-cash payments you would give to an employee in exchange for the work they do. It oftentimes includes wages, and those can be hourly or salaried wages. Sometimes we're talking about that in the context of base pay, which can be paid as an hourly amount, a salary, a piece rate, a whole host of different ways that employers can pay their employees. There are some federal laws that govern that, but there's a lot of discretion in terms of the actual structure of that compensation. And then there are variable rates that we see that are part of wages, including things such as commissions, overtime wages, tips, bonuses, merit pay, and things like that do not calculate into the base pay oftentimes, but are a part of the overall compensation package. As we also talk about compensation, though, then we also have to think about benefits. And benefits are an important part of the compensation package that employers have for their employees. Depending on what you do and the type of employee that you might have, those benefits can be as important as the overall as the compensation that you pay folks there. But those benefits include things such as health insurance that we oftentimes think about. It includes leave provisions, and those can be vacation leave, sick leave, bereavement leave, other types of leave like that that people are looking at. Some employers have gone to just a paid time option or a paid time off option, that they aren't breaking it up by vacation, sick, and things like that. Other employers keep those divisions up there. This can include retirement plans also that employers have that are available for employees. It's a benefit to help employees put some of their money away along with employer contributions for times down the road when they are no longer working there. Some other compensation parts that people will look at include stock options or other buy-in options that some employers provide, and other non-cash benefits that can help employers. And I've seen these, and we'll talk about what some of those look like, but I've seen them ranging from things such as equipment that you might buy for the work that they're doing. It can be clothing, but it can be a whole host of other items that employers provide that are part of an overall compensation package. When we talk about compensation matters. And I want to make sure that that's clear, even though we're going to talk about a whole lot of ways it doesn't matter also. But compensation is an important metric that employees and prospective employees look at to evaluate job opportunities. Here's some research from 2020 here, that 67% of job seekers look for salary figures in job ads. And so as you're trying to attract and recruit employees, the first thing that 2/3 of people that are looking for jobs are going to be looking for is, what is that wage? What sort of compensation are you providing? And is it information that that's going to be available, and is it competitive? How does that compare to what I'm currently making, and how does that compare to what my aspirations are to make for a particular job here? The second thing that prospective employees oftentimes look for is they look for information on benefits. So what sort of benefits are you providing? Are you providing healthcare? Are you providing free food, free tuition, things like that for your employees? That sort of information and that benefits package is something that almost 2/3 of employees also look there. And then 60% almost, or 59%, almost 60% look for information on location. So employees today are looking, where's this job located? How can I get there? Is it remote? Is it flexible? Do you require me to be in the office at a certain, or in the workplace at a certain number of days or hours? How does this work? And how does this location going to impact what I'm doing and what my availability is for work there? At the same time, though, I want to point out that it's not always about the money, right? That pay perception and the research that's out there on this for employee satisfaction oftentimes is more important than exact dollar amounts. And so employees, when they're looking for jobs, they're looking for pay information. Once they are employed, their satisfaction is driven more by the feeling that the approach to pay is fair and transparent, and it's not necessarily about the overall dollar amounts. They want to know, what do raises look like? How does my wage compare to others in the business here? And what I'm doing, is that fair for everybody? Or am I being treated differently than other employees are? Oftentimes we find that employees don't actually know the market rate. So even though we're going to be talking about how to figure out market rate information and what the market looks like in a little bit of this here, When you talk to your current employees, they oftentimes don't have a great grasp of what the market compensation would be. I can say in my own job, I don't know what they're hiring people in to do the same sort of work that I'm doing. I've been here for 10 years. I could look it up, but I don't, and I will look it up in various ways and kind of get an idea of that. But in terms of a day-to-day approach to my job satisfaction, the market rate isn't what's driving me as much as the satisfaction I have for the job that I'm looking at here. And employees do want to stay at a rising company. They are willing to forego some pay and benefits, oftentimes for the idea that they are able to join a company that's on the upswing, and they're going to be gaining benefits from that upswing there. Employees also, we know this, are driven by culture, and prospective employees are driven as much by this. So 66% of survey respondents from a Fast Company survey say that respondents wanted to know about a company's culture and values above all else when considering changing jobs. And so while we did say that pay and benefits are things that they're looking at in job ads, the questions that you're going to be getting when you're hiring are going to focus on more about what's the culture like, how do you treat your employees and things like that, and less just strictly on pay. I can speak from personal experience. My spouse recently changed jobs, and the pay was about comparable to what she was getting. It was a little bit less than what she had hoped to get, but the employer's culture and their value for their employees was something that actually, and the way that she felt that they were going to be treating her were things that attracted her to the job that she was looking at. So how do you put together a competitive compensation package? And a couple of things that we want to think about. And there are companies that have figured this out in a lot of different ways here. But the first thing that we have to talk about is ability to pay. So that's the questions for yourself as a business, and what can you afford as a business is the first thing. What can you afford to pay people? And that means, can you afford to pay them more money than you are? Do you have to pay them less? And this is where your work with the SBDC can help out considerably to help understand what your ability to pay is as a business there, and how do you structure your business in a way in order to gain productivity that you can then translate back to employees. One of my favorite examples here that I have on the top picture is Southwest Airlines. It's renowned in the airline industry for having decent employee relations here, and they have higher than average labor costs. So labor costs account for 37% of their total costs. But they recognize that they've recognized and figured out how to achieve higher labor productivity than their competitors there. So we look at Southwest, it's the most heavily unionized U.S. airline, and salary rates are at or above the average when compared to the U.S. airline industry. But they get more utilization out of their fixed costs. They do more with their employees and get more productivity out of their employees. And they control other costs. And then they have a culture that focuses on cooperation and work rules that encourage cooperation. And so they've figured out a way to get employee buy-in to the company, but also have figured out ways to make sure that they can make more money off of the fixed costs than what they have here. The second part of the question then, as you think about your ability to pay, is how do you structure that compensation package? And part of that's going to be driven by who you're hiring. If you're hiring young employees, I will tell you that they're looking more so at compensation in terms of wages and benefits than they are looking at, or in terms of wages than they are necessarily looking at benefits. If you're looking to hire people who are more mid-career though, an older career, that the benefits package is probably going to matter as much, if not more, than what you are, than just wages, as long as you're competitive on wages here. And then the question for you in that ability to pay is, what advantages can you create in your business in order to compete on compensation? If you can't compete on compensation, what structural changes do you need to make in order to do so? Because that compensation factor does matter considerably in terms of who you are hiring and their longevity with you. Now, as a business, you can choose to pay lower compensation, but understand that comes with business, that is a business choice. And I like to encourage businesses that you want to make that as a choice and not make that as a default proposition that you happen to run into here. The other thing is things that you have to think about as you're putting together a competitive compensation package are, what are the market demands that are out there? And there are two markets that you need to pay attention to. You need to think about your regional labor market. So what are other employers paying where you're located, and what that region even looks like. I will say in Missouri, we find people are willing to commute probably much more so than a lot of employers think. And so that regional labor market is probably broader than a lot of employers think, especially in rural parts of the state. The second part of the question, though, is what does that industry-based labor market look like also? So what do people, if you're doing IT, if you have an IT business, what do other IT professionals, what do they pay? If you are a daycare business, what do other daycare professionals pay? What does that what does that look like? Because that's going to influence then the choices you have to make as a business, but it's also going to influence the choices your employees make in terms of where they're looking for work and how they value the work that they do with you as opposed to other opportunities that might come along. So how do you find out information about sources of compensation? There are two major sources here. There are proprietary sources of information out there. So there are companies that specialize in providing information about and analyzing compensation. One of the big ones out here is a company called PayScale. You can buy a subscription to that, and they will give you a whole lot of insights about what compensation looks like for businesses, both regionally and also in terms of your industry there. Now, the one thing that we talk about with proprietary sources of information, though, is that these are expensive oftentimes to have a subscription. And unless you are using this on a day-to-day basis, it's probably not worth your investment. So that's why we do talk about public sources of information also. But recognize that these are the most up-to-date databases, these proprietary sources, and they're going to provide you the most detailed information about compensation and what the market is looking at out there. The other type of proprietary sources of information that you can find out there are companies that provide information on job searches and other labor market information. And the big one of these is a company called Burning Glass. And they will scan the web looking at job advertisements, and they'll provide you a whole host of information out there about what is going on in the labor market, and both regionally in terms of a local labor market, but also in terms of industry. So you can search by industry. You can also search by location as a part of this. The one thing I will say about the Burning Glass information is that it is not it is great for companies and types of businesses where that apply online. But if you're working in an industry where people are not likely to be searching for jobs online or advertisements aren't online, you're not going to find as much information. So the example I would use for that is if you're working in an agricultural industry and looking for farm laborers, you're probably not going to find many people that are searching for jobs and many job adverts in that space. And so there are other sources that you have to look at there. On the other hand, besides the proprietary sources of information, there are public sources of information, and there are three that I'm going to be talking about here. There's the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center. There's what's called Most Scores, and there's what's called Stats America. All these are free. You can access them, and I'll talk about where you can get access to these here. They can give you information about what the labor market looks like, what compensation looks like for different types of jobs. But the one caveat, the downside to this here is that information is oftentimes delayed. So there are some of these places you're looking at information from 2019 right now. You don't have your 2020 data in as a part of that. And other sorts of publicly available data, sometimes it's 2018 data. And then the other things that you'll see is data can be suppressed as a part of this, and as a part of the information collection that the state and federal government do. They collect all the information, but they will not share it if you can identify individual employers through the information that you have. And so you see this more often than not in locations where there's one really big employer, and that big employer, if you're talking, it's one big manufacturer, for example, and you could then identify that is that steel plant in town here. And because they are so big and they dominate that so much, you could identify them. And so they will then not make that information publicly available. In most places, that is not an issue in the state of Missouri. In your big cities, certainly that is typically not an issue. But if you get in the rural parts of the state, you can find that to be an issue as you relate to a whole host of information about labor markets there. So the first one of these that I want to look at is it's the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center's Occupational Employment and Wages tool. And if you go to merrick.mo.gov and the address on the screen there, you can actually get to this information here. And this is a federal and state cooperative effort that produces employment and wage estimates for 800 different occupations. And so you have to be able to search by occupation, and you can search by year, and you can search by location a little bit here to get this information. But this is what their search engine looks like. So you can search, this is if we want to look at Missouri, or you can do it by metropolitan area. You can select occupations on the drop-down screen, and you can select a year, and then you can view the data either as an annual wage, so how much are people making yearly, or you can look at it as an hourly wage. And if you do it, you can break it down like this. And so here's an example I've done for 2019 data for the Jefferson City metropolitan statistical area. So we're talking about Jeff City basically, and a couple of surrounding counties. And we looked at the job customer service representative. And so you found that title there. And with this, you can get information such as that there are estimated 1,600 people employed as customer service representatives in that area. The mean annual wage is about 34.5 in terms of what people are paid. There's $34,590 actually there. The 25th percentile is 26,750, and the 75th percentile works out to be about $40,270. And there's a wage error that you can look at. The smaller that error is, the more likely the more accurate the data is there. And so you can figure out that on average, the average wage here for folks in Jeff City that are working as customer service representatives is about $35,000. Now that means that half the folks that are working as this are going to be paid less than that. That means half are going to be paid above that. And so that's why these percentiles sort of help guide where the wages are in terms of that there. The information is also available the same way here as an hourly wage. So you can see that the mean is $16.63 an hour for a customer service representative. It's $12.86 for the 25th percentile and $19.36 for the 75th percentile. So it kind of gives you an idea for this type of occupation what wages look like. Now, maybe you don't employ customer service representatives, and that's something that and so maybe the title is not as important to you, but it can also provide you some information about what that competitive landscape looks like. So if you are losing your employees to customer service representative jobs, and you can look at this information and kind of figure out what those wages look like relative to the wages that you're paying for your business. Now, I will say this also. This information is just wages. It's not total compensation. And so the information that is available here is not going to include what the cost of benefits are for you. It's not going to include retirement plans, anything like that. So if you are providing that additional compensation, making sure that your employees and that you understand the value of that compensation and you talk about the value of that compensation is also important to help somebody understand that, for example, they might be making $34,590 a year. But by the time then you add on your health insurance costs of $12,000, let's just say, and they get free tuition that costs it's worth another $12,000. That their actual compensation package then would be more likely about $58,000 a year. So helping employees understand that as an overall compensation package is important as a business. But what this information is just showing you is just wages, and so I want to make sure that is clear also. If you have questions, by the way, feel free to pop in or anything like that, about any of the data or anything like that we're looking at. Or if you want more information about how to use this, there's a program on Tuesday that's going to get a little bit more detail about walking through the steps of using this and giving some examples also. The second tool that I want to talk about here is one called MoScores. It's one that's also provided by the state of Missouri and provides information about educational programs and the outcomes of those programs. And if you go to the web address here, scorecard.mo.gov/search, you can actually find this tool here. And what this is it actually collects information from higher education providers includes information about what the wages look like as a part of this here. So it's an education and training program search. I will say that the interface is a little clunky when I've used it. And so it's a little hard. It sometimes doesn't want to work as well as you would like for it to. And so keep trying at it and you will eventually get it to work. But sometimes it can be you might get an error message at first here. And so this is a search by program, by degree, credential type, field of study, and school. You can search by location, and you can filter then different pieces of information that are a part of that to figure out what sort of jobs that are available. And what you get here are then by program, you will get median earnings for that program. So the example I have here is a manufacturing technology, welding technology AAS program from State Fair Community College, which is in Sedalia. They award a degree of an associate degree, and the program length is 68 credit hours. But from a business perspective, what might be of most interest is this information here about median first year earnings. And so that's information that they collect, that they ask schools to provide to the state, that talk about what do people earn their first year coming out of school. And so you can see the graduates of this program have a median earnings of $38,720. And they also actually then will provide some information about state median of similar programs. And so similar programs, if you're in an urban area, the median salary for first year was $39,188, and a rural area was $34,862. And so you can kind of get a comparison and understand where you are and what graduates of this program are getting paid. It's more information for you in your toolbox to think about what that compensation should look like, and it gives you some idea of what the competitive landscape looks like here. You can also do some comparisons as a part of this. And so if you are looking to hire, for example, from 2 or 3 different schools, and the example here is the same, it's welding is what we're looking at here. But you can actually do a comparison. So on this one, I looked at State Fair, East Central College, which is in Union, the State Technical College of Missouri, which is in Lynn, and then Ozarks Technical Community College, which is in Springfield. Again, we looked at what the program looks like. What does the duration look like here? What is tuition? It gives you all that. But again, the things that might be of most interest for you as a business owner are what these median earnings are. So if you're talking about State Fair, the median earnings for the first year were $38,720 that we talked about. East Central College, for a similar type of program, the median earnings were $40,218. State Tech was $40,170, and Ozarks Tech was $31,344. So this can help give you some information not only about where you're recruiting from and what their graduates are looking like or are making, but also gives you some other information about possible places to recruit if you are recruiting people with from programs that are going to be having degrees that are going to be reported as a part of this year. And so it's another tool that can help you to think through what do wages look like for if you are hiring people that have degrees or might have degrees of some sort or another. But if we go back, we can see that you can look like it's any credential type. It can be apprenticeship programs and a whole host of things like that. So it might not, it could be a credential that's a certificate also. So not just a traditional degree program that you're looking at here. The final tool that I'm going to talk about here is a tool called Stats America. And this is provided by the US government, the Economic Development Administration, and Indiana University. And what this one does is it provides broad economic data focused on different geographies for you. And there's 2 tools that I'm going to talk about here. There's the US Counties and Profile tool, and there's the Big Radius tool. And if you go to statsamerica.org, you can get access to this, and it will provide you some additional information. So the first tool here is the US Counties and Profile tool. And again, this is broad economic information. So this is not specific to an occupation necessarily. This is not specific to a degree program, but this is broad economic information that allows you to really kind of think about the county that you operate in, or the counties that you operate in, and what work looks like in that county. And so the example here I have, you can get this information. This is for Cole County, which is the Jeff City area. And you can get information about population, about growth, about households, income, things like that. But what I think is a great publicly available tool for folks here is you can then see that if people have what percent have a bachelor's degree, but also like what sort of average wages there is per job in the county. You can see it by manufacturing, transportation and warehousing, healthcare, social assistance jobs, and finance and insurance. So it's not all employers, it's not all industries, but it gives you an idea of what wages look like in certain types of industries in the county, and what that is going to, how that's going to impact the business that you are running there. The other thing it allows is for side-by-side comparison to see how different counties compare. So if you are, again, operating, we'll say in the St. Louis area, and you can do a comparison to look at, St. Charles County, St. Louis County, St. Louis City, Franklin, and Jefferson counties to understand how those wages compare and get a better picture of what a metropolitan area piece of information might look like. The other piece of information that you can have is what they call the Big Radius tool. And that provides broad economic information that allows you to better comprehend work in a larger geographic area. And so you select an area that you want to start with, and you select your radius and a part of that area. So we did this again for looking at Cole County or Jefferson City area. But then I selected a radius as a part of this tool, and you can see what types of jobs are available in those areas and what the annualized earnings are available that are there per job. And so this was I didn't do a 500-mile radius. I think I did a 25-mile radius for Cole County, which is Jeff City as a part of this. But we can see that within 25 miles of the center of Cole County, that the average wage annualized earnings per jobs were almost $45,000. But we see that in retail trade, that was about $28,000. And accommodations and food services, that comes down to about $17,500. At the same time, then if you're in a professional, scientific, or technical service job, that the average wage works out to be about $65,000. So this tool again gives you a broad piece of information about what wages look like, And as you think about what you are doing and which of these broad types of industries you fit into, you get a better idea, and who you're competing with for your workforce, you get a better idea of what those annualized wages look like. You can figure that out per hour then if you want to with this is based on an idea of a full-time job, which is 2,080 hours per year. So you could take, you could take the $17,449 there for accommodation and food services, divide that out by 2080 and figure out what that looks like on an hourly basis there. You could do the same thing for other areas there and kind of get an idea of what an hourly wage, competitive hourly wage looks like for those industries also. And so this is, again, another snapshot. It's free, it's publicly available data that gives you some idea of what compensation should look like for your within the region that you live in and by industry. We're not going to talk about the next tool here because I don't have it in front of me, but Burning Glass is just a proprietary tool that I mentioned. And what Burning Glass does is it scours online job ads and provides aggregated information about those ads for you. It can give you a ton of information. The SBDC does have access to it. And if you need that sort of information through to help you make compensation decisions, then it can be provided. You need to get access it through your SBDC counselor if you have one that you are working with here. Any questions so far about the tools? Okay, then I want to switch a little bit of the conversation here then to creative compensation strategies. And we recognize that not everyone can pay, right? Sometimes your business is operating by a shoestring and you are trying to figure out ways to help people be attracted to the jobs that you have and to stay in the jobs that you have available there. So how can you then compete in a place where wages, and we talk about wages, and I talked about the importance of wages, are something that people are looking at here. And one of the things that I think is important for an employer to think about is creative benefits. And what can you do as ways to keep employees happy and that focus on them as a total person. And so some of the ones that you see kind of nationally, you see IT companies do a lot of this sort of stuff, but other employers are doing this also. So you see pet-friendly days and days that people can bring their pet to work. You see them bringing in massages. You see them providing vacation bonuses or surprise trips. You hear about employers that are providing date night or childcare for their employees to be able to go out at night. Spring breaks are the latest trend that people are saying, if they've gone to college, for example, or even going through their K-12 education, they've had a spring break. So why can't I have a spring break when I'm an employee here? Or accessing bikes and skateboards and scooters. And there's a whole host of these sort of creative compensation strategies that employers are undertaking to provide employees benefits, to think about them as a total person, but at the same way to look at things that aren't just tied to wages and traditional benefits. My wife's company that she's working for, one of the things that we just found out is that they're doing it this year because of COVID, but they provide an annual employee holiday getaway. They're a global company. Everybody works remotely, so they pay for our folks to get together once a year as a part of that. That's a very expensive benefit, right? And that might not be something that a small business can offer, but are there things like that you might have available that you can think about that your employees would value? And so there are a few things that you can think about here. First of all, the question I would have is, are there ways to structure your work differently that your employees will value? Maybe I worked with a road crew in Iowa about a decade ago, 15 years ago. And that road crew found that they really liked having a schedule of 4 10-hour days as their 40-hour work week. They found that 3-day weekend allowed them more time off. It allowed them to do more things that they wanted to do for themselves, and that included picking up other jobs. But they also found, the employer found they actually were more productive, right? Because these were folks that had to take their machinery out to do the work that they were doing. And so the act of driving that in and out took time. And so if that took an hour each way, they got 8 hours of work from them instead of 6 hours of work for what they were doing. So is that something you can think about there? Is remote work something you can even think about as an option here? And again, not all employers can do that, but that's something to think about for you as an employer. That could be permanent remote work. That could be a hybrid schedule if you are in an industry that allows for that, if you're in a type of job that allows for that. But maybe you aren't, but that's something, again, to be contemplating. And what does that look like here? Flexible schedules are another way that we are seeing more and more employers thinking about how they structure their work that employees may value that. And that could take a whole lot of different forms. It could be a flexible schedule of, I saw this years ago with the federal government that you could start work at 6:30, you can start work at 7:30, you can start work at 8:30, or you can start work at 9:30. And as long as you worked and as long as you worked till your time off, that was your schedule. And so there was some flexibility with that. So you can think about that as a structure. If you have the ability for employees to not have to be there, if you're not in a service business where they have to provide that service for you, maybe as long as it's that they get their work done, then you manage that schedule differently there. And so that's an important part of the conversation. Also, are there ways to structure the work that's being done differently, but as in a way that an employee will value? The second one of these I think about a creative compensation strategy is, are there inexpensive benefits that you can provide that employees value? And one of the things I keep saying this intentionally as a part of this here is that you have to provide benefits that your employees value. If your employees don't care about it, you can provide the Cadillac of benefits plans that are very expensive to you, but it's not going to help you within this process here. And so a few of these that I've heard about here include allowing access to the shop to wash vehicles. And so again, using that road crew as an example in Iowa, that they were allowed for years to drive their truck into the shop where that was kept, and they could wash their truck there free of charge, and that the employer didn't have a limitation on that. And that was something those employees valued immensely. And in fact, the employer took it away, and it created a whole bunch of headaches for them because they weren't doing that. So that's a type of inexpensive benefit. Can you provide an allowance to visit a cabin if you're not using it? We ran across this as an example from an employer in rural Missouri, a small business of about 5 or 6 employees, and they had a cabin at Table Rock Lake, and they found that a lot of their employees had never been outside the county where they were from there. And since they had this cabin, they allowed their employees as a part, if you did certain things, if you met certain goals, then those employees could have a weekend at the cabin, and they would allow them to go there when they weren't using it. And it was a getaway for those employees. It didn't cost the employer really much of anything because they were paying the mortgage on that cabin. They had the cabin out there, but it was a great value to their employees. If you have work vehicles, does taking a work vehicle home, is that something that you can think about as a part of this process here? Are there paid days that you can do for folks where they get out of the workplace and do something different? I see this a lot, and it's a benefit. I can say that, places that charge tuition, it's a huge benefit for them that attract employees to provide free or reduced tuition. One of the things that attracts people to work at the University of Missouri is the fact that you can get half tuition for dependents to attend the University of Missouri. My wife worked at Washington University in St. Louis, and Washington University, for people that worked there after a certain period of time, paid 100% of tuition to WashU for dependents. And so that is a benefit. That's a huge benefit for employees. And, it doesn't cost you a lot as a question. I even I was on a board of a daycare, and they provided that for their employees as free or reduced tuition, that they could send kids to the daycare as a part of that there. The same thing goes for meals, right? If you're providing meals as a part of your employment, can you give your employees free or reduced lunch? Is that a benefit that you can provide them? Again, helping quantify that benefit for employees is also a key part of your role as an employer, and thinking about how do you help them understand that this is value, that this is a cost, and they are getting this, and that's in addition to their compensation, right? So if somebody's getting a $5 meal every day, that works out to be on an 8-hour day, less than $1 an hour, but that is an additional cost that you are bearing as an employer, and that you're passing on, that you are then giving them as a benefit as a part of this here too. One of the things that I see employers talk about a lot more here, and I think about this a lot, is, are there ways to give employees a stake in the product or the outcome of what you're doing? And again, there are different ways that this can be done. So there are profit-based bonuses that employers do, and that's been kind of a traditional way that we think about that if you meet certain goals, if the company meets certain goals overall, then we will distribute bonuses at the end of the year based on the goals that we are trying to meet here. There are what you can say back-end deals that you see, so that if you spend a certain amount of time with the business, that you will get the thing is a certain amount of success, that once costs are recouped, you get a portion of the profit there. One of those stories I love about this is that the actor Samuel L. Jackson has those and his work, and he took less compensation for a lot of the movies that he did, and the back end deals. And at one point in time, a few years ago, Samuel L. Jackson was the highest compensated actor in Hollywood, not based on what he was getting per movie, but based on these back end deals where movies like Pulp Fiction and others that he'd been in that were highly successful were still paying him for the work that he had as that. And so again, is that something in your industry that could work there? And could you figure out ways to provide that for your employees there? The other thing is allowing employees over time to buy equity in the business. Can you sell them off after a certain period of time, or give them even a small portion of the equity that you have there, so that that if somebody's with you for 10 years, they get a 0.5% of the overall business. That gives them some buy-in to the business. It gives them some buy-in to the success, and it helps tie them to the overall business in ways that they otherwise might not be tied there. So recognizing that longevity, but at the same time, with that longevity comes additional say in the business and additional stakes in what it's doing. So if the business makes $100, you get a 0.5% of that $100. If it makes $1,000, you get a 0.5% of that. And so understanding their role as a part of that is a key part of that, the conversation here. And the final one of these, I will say, is thinking about deeper connections. And as I was preparing for this, I was really kind of doing a lot of looking at this whole idea of the Great Resignation and what does that mean, and how has that changed, and what's going on with this here. And one of the things that I kept seeing as a part of this is that there's some research out there that employers who demonstrated that they valued their employees over the last 18 months are seeing less of a loss for their employees than those who employees have felt like that they were not valued as a part of that. Their health and safety and welfare overall was not valued. And so that you see that, if you just automatically, if for businesses that just jettisoned people in the last 18 months and said, we're getting rid of you, then that affected that feeling there. But also there's stories out there of people being called back to work when they felt it was unsafe, and a whole host of things like that. So are there ways that you can build connections between you as an employer and an employee, but also between employees also, that they can foster deeper interpersonal relationships? And that was one of the key things I also saw with this Great Resignation, is that people are looking for that interpersonal connection. That after 18 months of working from home or being on staggered schedules or having to socially distance, that people are looking really for that deeper connection. And so how can can you make that connection here? And one of the key ones here actually is providing what they're calling increasingly paid play days. And play doesn't mean, I don't mean that you just let employees go off and do what they want to do, but having days that are different than your traditional work day to help them build connections with each other, to help them deepen those interpersonal relationships and have that community at work. And so having what I would even say is productive play days, where that play is being done to change the environment that people are in, but at the same time creates culture, creates community, and allows employees to do something different. And so that, again, that could be a whole host of different things that maybe, and there's actually some information that I can share with you on types of games. And sometimes those are just games where employees, in a staff meeting, that instead of having an hour-long staff meeting, you have a 30-minute staff meeting, then the other 30 minutes are spent trying to do things that are play related, but help them to get to know their fellow employees here. And the second thing to think about for employers are what kind of shared experiences can you provide? If you have a day that the business is closed, we'll say a teacher work day, if you're running a daycare, for example, and it's a day where you're closed on that. It's since it's a teacher work day, can you, instead of having them just come in and do prep work for the next quarter or whatever, can you provide shared experiences that help them build community as a part of this? And the key part of this whole idea is helping to build culture for your workplace and thinking about that as a key aspect to what you're doing, because the research has shown continually that younger employees, and I would say millennials is a part of this, but also this new generation, Gen Z, that's entering the workforce now, that they really are valuing culture, they're valuing lifestyle, they're valuing things like that. And so what can you do as a business to build culture for your employees and build that culture of being recognized as a great place to work and a place that people want to stay? And that can happen at anything from a restaurant to a daycare to your highest paid IT companies out there, thinking through that. But the importance of this is that that these relationships matters. And one of the folks that I love this quote as I saw it here today that has a podcast called How's Work. It's a woman named Esther Perel. who's a relationship expert. And she says that no amount of money or purpose or even free food can compensate for a poisonous relationship at work. Unlike performance, relationships are much harder to measure, harder to sustain, and harder to repair. But they are a key thing that she sees people looking for in the workplace. And that those relationships can be with clients, those relationships can be with other employees. But making sure that your workplace is not a poisonous place, not a poisonous place to be, is going to be it's a form of compensation, right? That's not dollars and cents, but it can help people be more integrated into the company there. And then and the other quote I saw as a part of this here from an Inc. article about business that said, if you want your people to stick around, you're going to have to convince them that what they're getting from signing in each day outweighs the stress, lost time, and foregone opportunities it costs them. And so that's the other part, is convincing your employees that what they're getting, and dollars and cents matters, right? But other benefits and things like that outweigh the cost of going to work on a day-to-day basis. The final thing I'll add as a part of this here is, don't be afraid to ask your employees or prospective employees what they value. Don't rely upon yourself and your experiences and your anecdotes to think that that's representative of everyone else. So make sure if you do employee sit-down meetings and you talk about the work and you provide feedback, ask them, what is it that you value about working here? What is it that attracts you here, and why are you staying? Not as a, why are you staying? I don't understand why you would stay in this job, but more importantly, like, what is it that keeps you here as an employee, so that we can structure our compensation and benefits package accordingly to meet your needs. You might find that your employees say that health insurance is great, but it's too expensive. So I'd rather you take what the $10,000 a year that you're spending on health insurance and plow that into wages. Or you might find that employees are saying, like, I really could use some health benefits. You might find that tuition benefit is a real key thing for attracting and retaining folks if you are an employer that has a school attached to it in some way, shape, or form. And so that might be a benefit that you have there. Maybe it's simply, it's a whole host of things, right? But asking your employees what they value is a key part, and what they want is a key part of this, because while it might be something that you think is important, you might find that they don't find it is that important. And so structuring your compensation and benefits to do that is kind of a key part of this also, to meet their needs. Again, you can always work with your SBDC counselors if you have them, to talk about how to structure your business in a way to be able to competitively compensate and provide the benefits that you want there, and to provide other whether that's fixed benefits like health insurance or other benefits. And that's one of the things that the SBDC will do for you. But there's a whole host of other resources out there that can help you understand just some basics of what compensation looks like and what that competitive environment looks like out there. Questions that you have? Well, if you don't have any questions, I appreciate your time. There will be a survey coming after this that's sent out. So I appreciate any feedback that you have. If you have any questions, I'm always available. You can reach me at, I don't have my email address on here, but I will put it in the chat, and we can, and I'm glad to help you think through some of these conversations for you also. And if you work with your SBDC counselor, I'm happy to work with them on providing some of this information too. In fact, I know that we have a request from one that they're getting ready to hire an employee, that their client's getting ready to hire an employee. Can we do a search on Burning Glass to help them understand what that compensation environment looks like? So again, we can do that for you if you, as an SBDC client also. Thank you for your time and good luck. And if you have any questions, let me know.